In the neighborhood where Yalin lived, names didn't matter unless someone needed something. People remembered what you did, not what you were called. Yalin was the kid who fixed bikes, the kid who helped at the bodega, the one who sometimes missed school but always carried around a notebook like it was glued to his hand. His world was about 15 miles away from the rooftop of the Beaumont Hotel, but it might as well have been another planet. He lived with his aunt and uncle in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The building leaned a little in the wind and had the kind of heat that only worked when you didn't need it. The wallpaper was peeling, and the hallway smelled like old carpet. And Burnt Rice. His uncle Carlos Freeman was a chef by trade, but only part-time now. Diabetes had slowed him. A back injury kept him from standing too long. But he still took the occasional shift when they were short-handed, especially when money was tight. That's what yesterday had been. Tight. Jalen had found his uncle at the kitchen sink that morning, dry heaving into a dish bin. "You're not going to work like that," Yalin had said. Carlos wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, wincing. "I'll be fine. They need me for the lunch shift." "Just till 2?" Yalin had clenched his fists. "You couldn't stand for 5 minutes yesterday." "I don't need to stand. I just prep, plate, touch nothing raw." But Yalin knew better. He always knew better. He wasn't trying to be a hero that morning. He just didn't want his uncle to collapse. So, without being asked, he followed. They took the red line. Carlos hunched over, pale as a ghost, trying not to breathe too deep. By the time they reached the Beaumont staff entrance, Carlos was wheezing. Inside the kitchen, chaos moved like it always did, fast, hot, loud. Flames kissed pans. Steel clanged. Orders flew. Nobody questioned Jalen's presence. He'd been in this kitchen before, washed dishes, chopped onions, mopped floors. People liked him. He was quick, quiet, and remembered who took their coffee how. While Carlos suited up, Yalin stayed near the sink. But his eyes, his observant, too smart for his own good. Eyes never stopped moving. He saw the moment Carlos touched the raw foie gras with ungloved hands. Saw him use the same knife to cut the garnish. Saw the bead of sweat drop onto the Wagyu steak. That's when something in Jalen's gut clenched. Carlos didn't look right. Didn't move right. His hands shook. He was rushing, sloppy. That wasn't like him. And then he heard the mater d say it. "Table 7, Mr. Greaves. Executive lunch." Priority plate? Jalen's stomach dropped. He didn't know much about Martin Greaves, just that his uncle called him a shark in a suit, and that if something went wrong with a dish for him, people got fired. Whole teams. Jalen didn't wait. He moved, slipped past the line cooks, past the pastry chef, through the double doors onto the rooftop. When he walked out into the sunlight, he didn't know what he'd say. Only that he had to say something. What shocked him wasn't the marble tables or the glint of crystal glasses, it was how small Martin looked, sitting there. The man was supposed to be larger than life, but in that moment, Yalin saw something else. A man with lines under his eyes. A man who didn't expect to be stopped. And Yalin had done it anyway. He wasn't brave. He was scared out of his mind. But sometimes fear pushes harder than courage. When Martin stared at him, like he was a roach crawling across a linen napkin, Yalin thought for sure it was over, but it wasn't. Because somehow, he was right back in the apartment that night. Yalin sat on the fire escape, staring at the lights of the city. His aunt was yelling inside. Carlos had come home pale, nearly passed out. She'd told Yalin to stay away from that restaurant from now on. Let the rich people poison themselves. But Yalin couldn't stop thinking about Martin Greaves. The way the man had looked at him, not with hate, not even anger. Curiosity. And that was worse somehow, because curiosity meant Martin Greaves might not forget him. And Yalin had a feeling that when rich people remembered you, It could change your life, for better or worse. Martin Greaves didn't sleep that night. He dismissed his security team with a clipped, "Thank you," waved off the PR manager's request for a statement, and locked himself in the penthouse suite overlooking the Chicago skyline. He poured himself a drink Dalmore 62, the kind of scotch people whispered about, and stared at his untouched dinner, now sealed in a forensic bag on the kitchen counter. One bite away, that's all it would have taken for a man who controlled markets with a phone call, who once fired a CFO over a single misplaced comma. That kind of vulnerability wasn't just uncomfortable. It was unacceptable. He ran the day back through his head on loop. The clink of silverware, the rustle of the wind, and then the kid. That boy had stood in front of him like he wasn't scared of a damn thing. And for some reason, Martin couldn't stop thinking about that moment. The fork halfway to his mouth, the boy's hand raised. "Don't eat that." It had been a long time since anyone had told Martin Greaves what to do, let alone a teenager in wrinkled jeans. Martin Greaves had grown up in a different kind of neighborhood, one where lawns were cut by people who didn't live there, and no one ever knocked twice. His father was a corporate lawyer who worked late and talked less, and his mother was a charity board darling who loved parties more than people. He was sent to boarding school at 9, expelled from 2, and graduated early from Yale with honors in economics and a notorious reputation for breaking 3 professors' curve systems. He didn't believe in luck. He believed in leverage, in data, in being 5 steps ahead. By 32, he had taken over a crumbling fintech firm and turned it into Greaves Global. Now, at 45, his holdings included real estate, clean energy, AI systems, private jets, 2 yachts, and most recently the entire culinary group that operated the Beaumont rooftop restaurant. That was part of why the incident mattered. It wasn't just the danger. It was the optics. Had that kid not intervened, Martin's face could have been on a hospital bed or a morgue slab, and the food safety scandal would have tanked shareholder trust. His competitors would have feasted on the headlines like vultures. And somehow, a kid with no credentials and no invitation had stopped it all. The next morning, Martin called his assistant. "Find out everything about the boy who interrupted lunch yesterday." He heard her hesitate on the other end. Yes, sir." That might take a little digging. He didn't leave a name, and security said he disappeared before anyone could question him. Martin didn't sigh often. When he did, people trembled. "I'm not asking for a zip code." He said, "His uncle works in our kitchen. Start there." Click. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the sunrise over the river. The sky looked expensive, like brushed gold, but Martin didn't notice. His mind was back on the rooftop, the flash of the boy's eyes, the tone of his voice, the raw certainty. There was no panic, no guesswork. It wasn't even bravery, really. It was something deeper, a compulsion. A voice in the boy's head that said, "This matters more than your fear." That kind of instinct didn't grow on trees. It was born in fire, and Martin knew fire. He had walked through it himself, but somewhere along the way, he had forgotten how to feel it. That boy Yalin hadn't. 2 days later, his assistant returned with the file. Name's Yalin Reed, 16. Lives with his aunt and Uncle Carlos Freeman, one of our part-time kitchen contractors. Grew up in Southside. No criminal record. Pretty sharp in school, according to his old principal, but kind of a ghost lately. His uncle's been in and out of the hospital. The kid helps around the restaurant sometimes unofficially. Martin opened the folder. Paper still mattered to him. A school photo. Yalin, arms crossed, eyes fierce. He studied it longer than he meant to. Then he said the words that would change everything. "I want to meet him. Arrange something discreet. Tomorrow." The next morning, a letter arrived at the laundromat apartment. Aunt. Carla opened it first, ready to rip it in half until she saw the header, Greaves Global Private Office. She stared at it like it might explode. Then called Yalin in from the back. He read it twice. Martin Greaves was inviting him to lunch. Private dining room. No press. No security team. Just 2 seats. Just them. Yalin looked at his aunt, unsure if this was a trap or a test, and then he folded the letter neatly and said, "I'll go." He didn't know it yet, but that decision wouldn't just change his future. It would change Martin's. The room was colder than Yalin expected. Not cold like the weather, cold like decisions had been made here that left people bankrupt, fired, or worse. It smelled faintly of citrus and something sharp, like a freshly opened envelope that had bad news inside. Everything in the private dining suite was too clean, too symmetrical. Even the vase in the center looked like it had been measured with a ruler. Yalin sat across from Martin Greaves, who looked exactly like a millionaire should, poised, pressed, and unreadable. The kind of man who could smile at you while restructuring your life without blinking. For the first full minute, neither of them spoke. The silence was worse than shouting. A server stepped in and placed a glass of water in front of Yalin. Martin waved the man off before he could take the next step. "We'll serve ourselves." The door closed with a soft click. Martin laced his fingers together on the table. "You don't look nervous." "I am," Yalin replied truthfully. "I'm just good at hiding it." That earned the tiniest twitch at the corner of Martin's mouth. Not quite a smile. "Not yet." He gestured to the empty plate in front of Yalin. "Would you like something to eat?" "I'm fine," Yalin said. "Last time I stopped someone from eating here, it saved their life." Martin leaned back. "Point taken." There was another pause, calculated this time. Then Martin said, "Tell me exactly why you did it." Yalin didn't flinch. "Because my uncle was sick. He shouldn't have been handling food that day. I saw what went into your dish and I knew something was off. If you ate it, you could have gotten poisoned or worse. No one else noticed." "They weren't looking," Yalin replied. Martin looked at the boy like he was dissecting a new investment. "You realize what kind of risk you took? If you were wrong, I wasn't." Martin nodded slowly, letting that sink in. "You remind me of someone," he finally said. "Me, when I still believed consequences were optional." "I didn't do it to be brave," Yalin said. "I did it because I didn't want my uncle to collapse on the kitchen floor and get everyone else blamed. That plate wasn't the problem. He was, and I didn't know how else to stop it fast." Martin studied him. Most people would have frozen. Most people don't watch people they love break down every week and pretend they're fine. For the first time, something flickered. Across Martin's face, maybe guilt, maybe memory. "Your uncle's fine," he said softly. "He was taken off the schedule until he recovers. I'm making sure he's covered full pay." Yalin blinked. "Why?" "Because you did what my own staff didn't." Martin poured himself a glass of water. "Yalin, you interrupted a billionaire's lunch. That's not something most people walk away from unscathed. But you? You walked in like a blade and cut through every layer of decorum, hierarchy, and fear. And you were right." He leaned forward. "Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Yalin shook his head. "I wasn't trying to be rare. I was trying to stop something." Martin gave a short laugh. "Intentions are cheap. Outcomes are currency." They stared at each other across the white linen, and then Martin stood, walked to a sleek leather briefcase on the credenza. He pulled out a thin folder and slid it across the table. "What's this?" Yalin asked. "A deal." Yalin didn't move. Martin clarified. "A paid internship, summer, part-time, with my private ethics review board. It's a think tank I fund for whistleblowing, system testing, and failure analysis. You'd be our youngest recruit." Yalin looked at the folder, then back at Martin. Why me? Because you saw something no one else saw. And you did something about it. I didn't go to private school, Yalin said. You didn't need to. You've got field instincts. The kind you can't fake, Yalin hesitated. And if I say no? Martin shrugged. Then I thank you for saving my life and wish you well. No pressure, no strings. Yalin opened the folder. Inside, a formal letter of offer, a stipend, a letter of recommendation signed already, even a Metro card preloaded with 3 months. Fair. I need to talk to my aunt. Of course you do. As Yalin stood, Martin added quietly, You asked me earlier why I'm helping. It's not charity. Yalin raised an eyebrow. It's investment, Martin said. Because people like you don't show up often, and when they do, you don't let them disappear back into the shadows. Yalin nodded once, and for the first time, Martin Greaves offered a real smile. Next time, he said, you won't need to stop the meal. You'll be helping write the menu. The rooftop restaurant buzzed with tension, an atmosphere thick and uneasy unlike the usual refined ambience Martin Greaves was accustomed to. After the shocking interruption by the boy in untucked clothes, the world Martin lived in of privilege, power, and control felt suddenly fragile. Behind the scenes, the kitchen had become a scene of chaos. Chef Laurent, the celebrated French culinary genius whose reputation had once dazzled critics, stood pale and trembling amid the clatter of pots and the hiss of stoves. His prized foie gras lay discarded in the sink, its surface slimy and sour. Restaurant manager Claire, a stern woman with steel-gray eyes, barked orders into her phone, arranging an urgent inspection. A health inspector was en route, and the entire kitchen staff waited nervously for the verdict that could make or break their careers. The investigation quickly unfolded. Like a tightly wound spool unraveling. It started with a whispered tip from Mom, a junior kitchen hand who had noticed shortcuts creeping into the preparation. The foie gras, Martin's favorite delicacy, had been kept in the fridge past its expiration date. Worse, the tools used for its preparation, the very knives and cutting boards, had been cross-contaminated with raw poultry. Violating every safety standard, Claire's accusations hit the head chef hard. We were understaffed, he muttered. The new sous chef, he rushed everything. I warned him, but... The inspectors found residues of bacteria that could cause severe food poisoning, especially dangerous to someone like Martin, whose recent heart condition made him vulnerable. When the news was relayed to Martin, the Millionaire's armor of invincibility cracked. He sat in his private suite, pale and trembling, clutching the armrest of the leather chair like a lifeline. For the first time, those around him saw something unfamiliar, a flicker of vulnerability, a trace of raw humanity. His voice, usually sharp and commanding, was hushed. I could have died, he whispered, his eyes glassy with disbelief. The boy in untucked clothes, the one who had dared stop him from eating, replayed over and over in Martin's mind. How had this stranger seen the danger that his entire team had missed? Why had the boy's defiance saved him? As Martin stared out the window at the city skyline, the distance between his world and the boy seemed both vast and impossibly close. He was shaken, not just physically, but deep down in a place he rarely let others glimpse. The kitchen was quieter now, the hum of tension thick in the air. The boy with the untucked clothes, Jamal, sat slumped against the peeling wall of the restaurant's cramped back room, arms crossed tightly, face stony but eyes wary. Earlier, the head chef had stormed in, his voice low but furious. You don't get to decide who eats and who doesn't in my kitchen, he snarled. You've put the whole place at risk. If I had my way, you'd be out on the street by now. Jamal had said nothing in reply, just stared down the floorboards as the threat hung heavy. The threat wasn't empty. He was young, with no connections, and working a low-wage job that could disappear with a single bad word. But then came the unexpected. Martin Greaves, the millionaire, the untouchable, had asked to see Jamal. The request was so surprising that even the staff whispered in disbelief. Why would Martin want to meet a kid who had just embarrassed his entire team and interrupted his lunch? Jamal was escorted to the private lounge where Martin waited, seated behind a heavy oak desk, his expression unreadable. "Sit," Martin said curtly, motioning to the chair across from him. Jamal hesitated, then obeyed. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Martin spoke, voice calm but with a newfound gravity. "You saved my life." Jamal blinked. "I didn't mean to. I just saw something wrong. I wasn't trying to be a hero." Martin's gaze softened slightly. "Most people in your position would have stayed silent. You could have kept your head down and collected your paycheck. Instead, you stood up. That takes courage." Jamal shifted, unsure how to respond. He'd never been praised by a man like Martin Greaves before. Martin continued, "I want to offer you something more than just a reward. A real chance. I have foundations, businesses, and projects where someone with your instincts and guts could thrive." Jamal's eyes widened. "Why me? I'm nobody." "No," Martin said firmly. "You're someone who sees the truth. That's rare. I want to help you find a path away from here, towards something bigger." For the first time, Jamal felt the weight of possibility. The oppressive limits of his world cracked open just enough to let hope slip through. The tension between them remained, two worlds separated by privilege and struggle, but now bridged by respect and an unspoken promise. Martin stood, offering his hand. Jamal took it, unsure but ready to take the first step. The days after that meeting were different for Jamal. The usual bustle of the kitchen felt distant, like he was watching from outside his own life. Yet, the promise Martin had made echoed in his mind, an offer not just of money, but a future. Martin's team arranged a mentorship program for Jamal, connecting him with people who could teach him skills beyond the kitchen business, leadership, and education. For the first time, Jamal saw that there was more to his potential than the cramped apartment he came from or the low-wage job he held. Still, the transition wasn't easy. Some in the restaurant whispered that Jamal was getting special treatment, that he didn't belong in the world of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. Jamal struggled to find his footing among unfamiliar faces and polished suits, but Martin was there, steady and patient, pushing him to learn, to ask questions, to believe. One afternoon, as the city's skyline gleamed through the glass walls of Martin's office, Jamal asked quietly, "Why did you help me?" Martin looked out the window, then back at Jamal. "Because I was lucky someone cared enough to stop me. I was blind to the risks, surrounded by people who only told me what I wanted to hear. You reminded me that sometimes the truth comes from the most unexpected places." Jamal nodded, understanding that this was about more than just a job. It was about change. For Martin, for himself, and maybe even for the world they both inhabited. Together, they began to build something new, not just a mentor and protege, but two unlikely allies crossing the boundaries of their worlds. Sometimes, life's most profound moments come from the places and people we least expect. A boy in untucked clothes, working the kitchen's back room, dared to speak truth to power and in doing so, saved a man who had everything but had almost lost it all. Martin Greaves, the millionaire, discovered humility and humanity through Jamal's courage. Jamal, the boy who once felt invisible, found a path to a future brighter than he ever imagined. Their worlds, once so distant, were forever changed not by money or status, but by the simple act of standing up and being seen. In the end, it wasn't just a meal that was stopped. It was a moment where two lives collided, teaching us that courage and kindness can break down even the highest walls. And sometimes, the smallest voices have the power to save us all.